especially at different stages with the disease, following through with the care partners to say, you know, I'd love to relieve you. Trust me, we all see people with the disease in one way, and care partners see them in another way because they're living in that situation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we all should be a part of saying we want to spend the time and also support care partner. So figuring out a way in which we understand what the limitations are and can support the care partners too in a moment of respite. We got our last. We're going to hear from Lex.
Really, I just wanted to make a couple comments. I'm a physician, but also the parent of an adult with special needs, and have also dealt with a lot of end-of-life issues within my family. And what I find my role being now is a sounding board for all my friends calling me, what do I do because their parents are aging? What do I do in this situation? What do I do in that situation? And being an advocate for them, saying, it's okay to ask these questions. Ask the doctor this, ask the doctor that. It's okay to be an advocate for your parent. And so there's a whole concept of health advocate, and I don't really know if that's an entity, but I feel like there's so many places where we can educate families on their rights or the questions to ask or translate what they're being told because they don't understand, patients or families. And then the other thing, my husband's a radiologist, and he comes home many days upset about having to do a study on someone with Alzheimer's or something that clearly doesn't understand what's going on or why something's being done, and then my husband not really understanding why this test was ordered in the first place. So, it's, you know, for physicians, a lot of times we get maligned for doing too much, but there's also a lot of physicians out there that are like, you know, why am I doing this? Why are we going this extra step? Because family doesn't want to let go, or education hasn't been given. So that's just
hard conversations haven't been had. Okay, I think we have. Thank you all for still being here, for your comments. Hi, Lex. Okay, we got to get. Do we have sound for Lex? We're going to do.
How about that?
Hey, I can hear you. So
okay.
I'm going to introduce you real quickly, Lex. I can't read your whole bio because I only have 30 minutes. So Lex is a professor of biomedical informatics and professor of rehabilitation at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. He's the director of the Independent Living Resource Center at TIR Memorial Hermann. He's a professor of rehabilitation at Baylor College of Medicine. Now, Lex, I took a peek at your Wikipedia site, which I'm not going to read the whole thing about that either. I'm moving so I can see you. So I just want to read you the opening paragraph of Lex's Wikipedia site. Lex Frieden is an American educator, researcher, disability policy expert, and disability rights activist. He has been called a chief architect of the Americans with Disabilities Act. He's also regarded as the founder and leader of the independent living movement by people with disabilities in the U.S. He has served us in this country many ways. He did work with Congress. He served at the National Council on Disability as the executive director. He then later came back. I think for the first time you were working with George Herbert Walker Bush on the lead up to the adoption of the Americans with Disabilities Act. He came back in the early 2000s and served as the head of the board of the National Council on Disability, and has continued to work on updates to the ADA and all manner of federal law and policy on behalf of people with disabilities. I asked Lex to join us today to just wrap this up and again be grounded in talking about people as patients as people. His long experience living with a disability, his knowledge of the healthcare section, and his work with disability all across the country and in the U.S. So I'm going to stop talking, let Lex talk, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
I'm glad to be here. I did not anticipate being quite as authentic as I am, but I suppose the authenticism actually adds to the presentation here. Your horizontal controls are not badly organized because I am indeed lying down. I'm in bed, and this device I have in front of me is a portable mouse that I can use to manipulate the my computer and the screen and so on. I would like to have been there in Kansas City with all of you. That didn't work out so well. And then I was planning to be in my studio broadcasting with you with my tie on and so on. And it turns out that didn't work out so well. About 6 weeks ago, I was in a car here in Houston in a van, tied down. My wheelchair was strapped in very well, and we were crossing a intersection, and a truck actually ran a red light and hit us. And as a result of that, I had yet another near-death experience. So I'm spending quite a bit of time here prone, and I apologize if if any of you find the layout distracting or my little mouse here distracting or anything, but I hope you can appreciate the circumstances. I'll share a little bit with you about my perspective, and that started years before in another traffic accident. When I was a freshman in college, actually my first semester, I was missing being at home, and the first break that we had from the college that we could leave and go back home was the Thanksgiving break. And I was looking forward to getting back to seeing my family and friends. And the Thanksgiving holidays at college usually involve the day before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving Day itself, the following day, and then the weekend, making a nice 5-day break from school. And in fact, in many schools, they try to tie the whole week up by letting class off on Monday and Tuesday. That way you have 2 weekends and a week between that you can spend away on a break. In my case, all of my instructors, except one, had given us the Monday and Tuesday off, but the one class that I was actually making an A in at the time, a psychology class, the instructor said if we didn't show up for her class on Monday, she would fail us, all of us, because she had to be there and she expected us to be there. She said she didn't mind which section we came to, whether it was her 8 o'clock in the morning section or her 3 o'clock in the afternoon section, but we needed to show up for class. A group of us, after class was over, were kind of upset about her attitude and wished that we could have cut the class, or if she would have excused us so we could spend the whole week and the weekend at home. But she didn't do that, and we thought, well, we should at least go to the early class so that we can drive home early in the day on Monday. And one of the guys who was standing around there said, she didn't say how we had to dress or how we had to appear. Let's just party all weekend and show up at her class on Monday morning, making her wish we had not come. And so we started on that Friday evening, and then we partied all day Saturday and Sunday, and around midnight on Sunday, the driver of the car that I was riding in decided to pass a line of traffic in downtown Stillwater, Oklahoma. He was in a hurry to get back to the dorm, and we had a head-on collision with a carload of students coming the other direction. I couldn't move anything after that. I didn't lose consciousness. I just had a moment of shock and realized that my arms didn't move, my legs didn't move. I didn't know that I had a broken neck, but they treated me as though I did at the time. And eventually at the emergency room, the doctor determined that I needed to see a neurologist in Oklahoma City. And they transported me by ambulance that night within an hour probably of the time that we were actually hit in the car. And I was met there at the emergency room at St. Anthony's Hospital in Oklahoma City by, at that time, one of the leading neurosurgeons in Oklahoma, Don Reinhardt. And Dr. Reinhardt greeted me about the same time as I arrived. My family, my mother and father, arrived from our community in northwestern Oklahoma. And we were all there in the emergency room together when the doctor said to my parents and to me, I suppose, Lex has been badly injured, and we're going to have to do surgery to stabilize his neck. And, his future is going to be dependent on a number of things, and we really can't predict. But there's a high likelihood that he's going to be severely disabled. And my mother said, well, what do you mean by that? And the doctor said, well, he may well not walk again, and he will have other likely complications with his bodily systems and bodily functions. And the doctor said, at this point, you all can make an important decision. And that is, we can use everything we know to do. We can do surgery. We can try to stabilize Lex. We can give him the best care. Or we can let nature take its place. We can let the natural proceeding of life occur and possibly pass. And my father was a little stunned, and my mother said, well, you mean he might die? And the doctor said, actually, if we don't intervene, he most certainly will die, probably within the next 48 hours. And the doctor said, you have a choice to make now about whether we do try everything we can do to maintain his function and to keep him alive, or whether we do let, as I said, nature take its course. Well, my mother said, you've said that he might not walk again. Will he be able to cognate? Will he be able to make decisions? And the doctor said he did not hurt his head. His brain was not injured as far as I can tell. And his cognitive functions won't likely be affected. And my mother at that point said, well, doctor, you have to do everything you can to keep Lex alive and to preserve as much function as you can. And I didn't participate in the conversation. I was there. I heard it. I processed. I was glad my mother was there. And also glad my father was there, although he didn't enter in the conversation at all. And the doctor said, if that's your will, then, we're going to proceed, and we'll probably try to do surgery within the next 48 hours. And we'll do everything we can to make him comfortable, keep him alive, and to restore as much function as possible. And that happened. And I often, thought about that, because if my mother had said, Lex has lived a good 18 years, and we can't bear to see him carry on, not being able to swim as he did, not being able to go camping as he did, not being able to play the piano as he did. He won't be able to play the trumpet again if the doctor is right, and we just can't bear to see him survive under those circumstances with those limitations. She might well have made a determination that they should do nothing and let nature take its course. Some families might have done that. I don't know, and I won't make a judgment about whether they would or wouldn't. I can only say I'm happy that my mother made the decision that she made and made the assertive action that she took. But how many times I wondered, and I still wonder, frankly, are patients in an emergency room in the same condition that I was in or worse, where there is no family member who will speak up and say, do everything you can. How often do medical people, doctors primarily, make a decision that in their case they would not want to be alive? There is some evidence and some literature that will indicate that physicians very often have a darker view of life under those circumstances than the general public even. And I hope that's changing. I've tried to do everything I can through medical education, taking the opportunities I have taken. And I know that the Center for Practical Bioethics, John Carney, has been a colleague and friend for a long time. And the center there has done so much good education and helped so many people understand these kinds of life and death decisions. But I'll tell you, I know, working in the Texas Medical Center, that these decisions are made every day, sometimes by family members, sometimes by the individuals themselves, although not often, I think, and sometimes by the care providers, by the physicians and others who are involved in the service. We see example after example of that. Sometimes they're very subtle. You don't even realize it's happening. A nurse with a certain attitude will close the IV. In the case of my mother, who later had terminal cancer, we were ready, following her directions, to let her die a peaceful death rather than to have a horrible, painful death. And she was hospitalized. The doctor was on board with that. And at some point in the process, a nurse claiming to have some ethical problems and moral problems and religious problems with the idea that my mother could die naturally under those circumstances, turned on an IV that actually fed her, brought her back to consciousness at a point where she was very, very painfully affected. And that was just wrong. We didn't realize what was happening until it happened. The doctor came in and saw what had happened and intervened. The nurse was discharged, and it was a kind of a horrible experience. Everybody needs to communicate. You need to understand clearly what your family expects and wishes. And even then, there are so many individual differences. I can tell you about a friend of mine who a few years ago, Marianne Board, had very serious medical conditions, and she made it clear to her partner and to her physician, and everybody was in agreement, that if she lost consciousness at any given point in her hospitalization, nature would be left to do what nature did, and everyone knew the next step within a few hours would be death. She did lose consciousness. The doctor said to her partner, you know what? I don't think this is the end. I think Marianne's body is telling us she needs a rest. And if we can just keep her in this state of minimal consciousness for 2 or 3 days, I believe that she will wake up and she will have another 2 or 3 months and maybe another 2 or 3 years to live. And Marianne's partner prayed about it. She thought about it. She contemplated it. She conferred with the doctor a couple more times, and they agreed, we're going to let Marianne sleep in this state for a couple of days and then see if she wakes up herself. And sure enough, she did. I talked with Marianne about a week after that experience. I said, Marianne, your wish was to die when you lost consciousness. and yet you're here talking to me. What do you feel about that? She said, well, the problem that I see is that while you make a decision that's an informed choice at any given time, and you lose consciousness, you're missing information. And she said, I'm just glad that Pat, my partner, realized that if I had had the information the doctor gave me at that time, I would have chosen to try and sleep a couple of days and then wake up so that I would be here with you visiting today, and so that I would be able to spend the next few months with my family and friends and enjoy that quality of life. So we have so many individual differences, and sometimes, given the best odds, you can make a prediction, but you won't know the outcome until you've actually experienced it. In my case, again, I'm lying here in bed. Typically, I wouldn't invite a group of folks into my home, into my bedroom under these circumstances, but I just feel it's important to be able to communicate the desire that people with disabilities have to make decisions that affect their own lives. We look back at the definition of independent living, and we worked on that definition for a long time before it was actually made part of the statute. Independent living is making decisions that affect your own life. In order to make decisions, obviously, you have to have a certain degree of information, amount of information, and information that's of value in the context of making that decision. And furthermore, in order to have a valid choice of options, you must know what the options are. And to say that a person who is lying in a protected state in some kind of nursing home or other kind of facility is given the option to, go to church or not go to church, that's fine. They can accept that option. But they should have other options too. It's not limited options that create the opportunity for people to choose. It's limitless options. It's options that anyone else might choose from. So somehow we convince ourselves that by giving an individual the choice of what they want to wear in the morning, rather than just slapping a robe on them, is helping to promote a better quality of life or helping to promote decision-making on their part. Well, maybe it is, if that's the only options that are available to them, but it shouldn't be. People should have the option of living in that nursing home or living at home with assistance. And we don't have an infrastructure now that will reliably support that kind of lifestyle for people. And so some people who are confined, restricted in a nursing home or other facility may well choose to die. They might even commit suicide. If that same person had the option of being in the community in their own homes with caregivers who they choose, who will follow their directions, that whole equation has changed. And the only thing we've done to affect the equation is give them the opportunity to be more independent according to their standard in the community and to be where they wish to be. And in not providing the infrastructure that people need to have that support, we're changing the whole equation. And I just think we need to work harder to convince the public authorities, to work with voluntary agencies, and to build infrastructures in our communities that will enable people to have a choice to engage in independent living according to the standards that they might set themselves, which, by the way, are likely to be the same standards that you set for yourself. Why do we change our expectations of what person's quality of life might be just because we happen to see them as having a disability or a chronic health condition or, old age? Why do we change our expectations? Why would we expect them to be comfortable in some kind of a super protected setting when they would not choose to do that themselves, all else being equal. And yet we do. We accept the fact that we have dozens and dozens of old people in nursing homes who would prefer to be in their own homes in the community, and who, by the way, might be able to be cared for under those circumstances at a lower cost than the cost of caring for them in a facility. So, there's a lot of issues wrapped around this onion, and I think the exercise today has been a good one to help people unpeel some of those layers. But we really have to look deep. These are not simple questions. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if they were. But there are no simple answers, just like they're not simple questions. And the answers really have to be based, I believe, on individual will. And I don't think everybody will choose the same thing. We operated an independent living program here at Tier Memorial Hermann for a number of years, where we took people from the community, from people who'd been protected and sheltered for years and years. We let them live with other people who had disabilities, some of them more independent, and they picked up on that. And many of them chose, after they had the tools, the rehabilitation, even the necessary economy, to move into the community and live more independently. Some of those people actually chose to move back to the facility. Why did they make that choice? I often wonder about that. And we interviewed them, and we began to answer the question. They did it because they were comfortable, more comfortable under those circumstances than they would be if they were living in the community. They were afraid, they were anxious, and in the protected setting, they felt secure. Well, that was their choice, and we couldn't manipulate the way they felt. We could provide them with a lot of reinforcement, offer to provide support, do everything we could to make them comfortable in a standard that we would appreciate. But in the end, they made their own decision. One guy told me, you know what? I'd rather somebody else be responsible for fixing the water heater when the water doesn't get hot. I'd rather somebody else be responsible for replacing the roof when the tile blew off. I'd rather be somebody else be responsible for doing the shopping, because I just don't want to deal with that. Well, there's some practical information there, and the decision that he made and others were based not on my values, but on theirs. And that's the way it should have been. They had, however, a choice. And some of their colleagues moved into the community. Some of them actually wound up going back to the nursing home because they couldn't manage in the community. That probably was our error, because we didn't give them enough training, enough support, enough assistance. But they chose to move one way or the other, and that, I think, is the most important value. I think in terms of the life and death decisions that people have to make, they have to choose based on the options and the choices that they're given at any given time. That's why I think communications is important. I think the decision in many of these cases has to be shared if the person chooses to share that decision with a partner, a spouse, or a caregiver. And the best thing we can do is to provide them with a range of acceptable options, not based on our values, but based on theirs, and they will choose what those are. Kathy, I don't know if I've said enough or too much, or if we have an opportunity to do some discussion here.
Lex, if you're open to it, we'll take a couple questions, see if people have questions for you. And if I stand over here where I'm supposed to be, can he see me back? I don't know what the video link is. It's a one-way? Okay. Just didn't kind of know. People want to ask questions to Lex? Any thoughts? I've got a very attentive group who've been here. Your buddies in the back, Ray Petty, Mike Oxford, have a question. Or are you just waving at him? Just say hi.
Is
Mike
Ray
Oxford
Petty
and Ray
there?
Petty. Ray Petty's here.
Ray Petty needs to go back to the institution.
They kicked him out, I think. Really, do you have any questions? You just want to say hi? He's on a weekend pass. He's wanting me to tell you. Ray and I have known each other for a long time. Lex, let me ask you one question. Then
Wait, I had a question. I had a real question.
Where we go?
Hi, Lex. Mike Oxford.
Oh, there we go.
So I'm curious about what you talked about at the end about the experience of people kind of moving out of the community and moving back and the decisions there. I think, as you know, I've been very involved in helping people move out to the community, have had some similar results, but I wonder if you ran into anything around the length of time someone was in an institution and how that affected, you know, the choices and their self-perception of what they wanted taken care of versus being more independent.
Yeah, you know what, Michael, there's a kind of an assumption, and I haven't seen any data, that people who are in an institution longer may have a more difficult time of transitioning. I don't know what your experience has been, but I can tell you this. We have been surprised. Some people have been in an institution a long, long time. You know, they'll do anything to get out, and they'll take risks, and they'll get out there and they'll work on it, and they'll be happy in the community. Whereas some people who are more recently institutionalized don't seem to want to take many risks. And I think that's, you know, the concept of risk taking, I didn't mention that, but that's one of the aspects of independent living that we seldom get around to. People with disabilities sometimes are protected from taking risks. And why shouldn't we be able to take risks just like somebody who chooses to participate in the X Games?
No, I think I've had similar, just so you know, kind of things, but there does seem to be an idea around the longer folks are in, kind of the more support they'll need out, I mean, for a longer period of time. And this is my final thing that I've been really on, having fun.
Having fun.
Having fun is so important, whatever that means to you. I don't even want to talk about what Ray and I's idea used to be when we were younger, but we don't need to go there. But yeah, having fun, and because life can be very serious. Appointments, scheduling attendance, you know, dealing with all this stuff can be very serious, and like we forget about, I think, as people that help people, having fun. So we call it social and recreation because it sounds better to funders, kind of a thing. But I think just sheer old building in having fun and concentrating on that, we've found to be a very important element more recently in geologic terms.
That's a good dynamic, and you know, a great point. Thanks, Mike.
So, Lex, we've come to the end of our day. I've kept people here all day, given them a lot of new information. So I think I will wrap up now. Thank you for showing up. I've got a pixelated picture. Thank you for coming today, remotely from Houston. So, where did he go? We hope you're upright.
It's been my pleasure. I hope you all have a nice dinner. I'm sorry I can't join you tonight.
Thank you. We did the dinner last night, but you know, you're welcome in our part of the world anytime. You can make it to Kansas City. You should let us know.
I heard they have some decent barbecue up there.
Yeah, barbecue and Mexican food. It's not a diet city. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Lex. I'm going to help wrap things up here, so thanks for joining us.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. He's just awesome. Come on back up, John. Thank you all for your attention today. I was thinking about where we started. This is not the beginning of conversation or the end. This is just another stop along the way as we meet new people. It was fun for me personally to introduce you to some of the wonderful people that I had a chance to meet the last few years and demonstrate that we can bring them here. We can get them here. We've got connections. We've got opportunities locally. We've got opportunities really all over the country to figure out what are the best things we should be doing to help people here deal with their health, their illness, their life, their happiness, their fun. Shelley, I hope fun is on your star. I thought about that when Mike said it. So take us on out.
Well, I want to express my appreciation to Kathy, too, for putting together such a fabulous program today. It's really been great. Also, my deep appreciation to the panel this morning. I'm kind of with Clay. There are some things that I heard today that challenged my thinking. I've been in the field of hospice and palliative care and end-of-life decision-making for 30 years. I think it helped me reintegrate and reframe some issues for myself. I've still got some language questions that I want to deal with. I told Tina as she was walking out the door to catch a plane that I wanted to talk to her some more about the conceptual ideas around the difference between independence and autonomy. It's a completely different definition, I think, than I've been rolling around in my head for a long time. To Bob, I always knew about to and fro, but I didn't know about to and for. And that, I think, really will stick with me. I think it is a fabulous way for healthcare clinicians to take a very, very simple statement and say, this is what we can do to you. I need to know what we can do for you. And that is an easy question to ask. And if you're authentically asking it, I think clinicians will take the time to authentically respond to it. And there are so many of these tools that you guys presented today that are simple ways for us to get at the true expressions of the person in front of you. Rich, too, with his comments. I don't know. This is a lot of food for thought for this organization and for our work with all of you in the community. So I want to just say how much it has been a very fruitful day, and I hope you've enjoyed it and benefited from your participation. I think we are going to be sending out an evaluation. Would love to hear more from you about maybe facets of today that you would like a little bit more. I know there were a couple concerns already about we didn't get enough time to chat. There wasn't enough time for networking, and I told Kathy at lunch, I said we probably should have made this a 2-day conference than a 1-day, but it certainly gives us a lot of opportunity for the future. So again, my sincere thanks to KCU, Kim, and the folks in the booth, Shane, and I'm dropping his name here, Mike. Mike. Thank you to you. We'll express our appreciation to Dr. Hahn and others here. So any final questions or any final thoughts maybe from the speakers or Shelley? You did a fabulous job. I told her when she finished, you never said once. And she didn't look at her slides. And she had that 5-layer, did you see that 5-layer thing with the 3 and then the circle and the circle and the circle and the 5 stars? She just went like this, clear out here, and never even looked behind her. And I thought, I know I can get in a zone sometimes when I'm talking about advanced care planning. That was fabulous. I thought you did a great job. So anyway, anybody else? Any thoughts or parting comments that anybody wants to make? Anything that struck with you? Nobody? All right. Well, again, thank you very much for helping make today so wonderful. Appreciate it.